Quick question. Among the tens of thousands who stormed the beaches of Normandy on that fateful day, who was the only woman to set foot on the sand? How did the Allies convince the Nazis that the invasion was happening somewhere else? And which elite unit had secretly surveyed the landing zones months in advance? If you don't have the answers yet, don't worry. In the section below, we'll uncover 5 lesser-known but truly unforgettable facts about D-Day, details that may completely change how you view June 6, 1944. Fact number 1. The battleship that sacrificed itself to stay in the fight. In the annals of modern naval history, few warships ever made a move as bold as the USS Texas during World War II, deliberately flooding itself just to stay in the battle. Commissioned in 1914, the USS Texas was a New York-class battleship, representing cutting-edge naval technology of its era. She was the first American battleship equipped with anti-aircraft guns and an electronic fire control system, pioneering tools that helped shape the future of naval warfare. During World War I, the USS Texas escorted President Woodrow Wilson to France for the historic Versailles Peace Conference, which marked the end of the Great War. Between the wars, she often served as a command vessel for senior U.S. military leaders, and even transported President Calvin Coolidge to Cuba for the Pan American Conference. By the time World War II erupted, the USS Texas had already served for nearly 3 decades, but she was far from obsolete. Following a major overhaul, she was given one of the most dangerous and critical tasks of the war, providing fire support for Operation Overlord, the massive amphibious invasion of Normandy. On the morning of June 6, 1944, the USS Texas was positioned just off Omaha Beach, supporting the 29th Infantry Division and 2 elite Ranger battalions, the 2nd and 5th, as they assaulted the German stronghold of Point du Hoc. Her firepower was staggering. 255 heavy shells were unleashed in just 34 minutes. For comparison, during Operation Torch in North Africa, she fired 300 shells over 8 full days. But what truly made her story unforgettable wasn't the sheer volume of fire. It was a radical and risky maneuver that happened a week later. As Allied forces pushed inland, the front lines moved out of range. The ship's massive guns could no longer elevate high enough to reach the new targets. The solution: intentionally flood part of the ship to tilt it. The crew opened flood valves on the starboard torpedo blister, causing the ship to list by about 2 degrees, just enough for the portside guns to lower their angle and resume firing inland at German positions. It was an act of sheer ingenuity and bravery, a calculated gamble that kept the Texas in the fight and helped protect hundreds of American troops advancing through hostile territory. Thanks to that brave and unconventional decision, the USS Texas not only avoided being sidelined, but became a lasting symbol of resilience and unbreakable willpower in modern warfare. Fact number 2. The brilliant deception of the Allies when scarecrows learned to parachute. Many people think of D-Day as nothing more than a massive amphibious assault on the beaches of Normandy. But in reality, it was also one of the most elaborate psychological and diversionary operations in the history of modern warfare. On the night of June 5th into the early hours of June 6, 1944, as Allied troops and ships were preparing to land on the real beaches, a secret mission codenamed Operation Titanic was being quietly put into motion behind the scenes. Its objective: convince the Germans that the invasion would happen in completely different locations than it actually would. As part of this plan, the Allies deployed one of their most unexpected weapons, parachuting scarecrows, jokingly nicknamed Roberts. About 500 of these Roberts were created from coarse Hessian sacks, stuffed with straw, standing just around 3 feet tall. But from the ground at night, they looked shockingly realistic, especially since some were rigged with small explosives, mimicking self-destructing parachutes, tricking the enemy into thinking paratroopers were destroying their gear to avoid capture. Elite squadrons from Britain's Royal Air Force, RAF, dropped these dummy soldiers across Normandy, focusing particularly on the southern regions, far away from where the real Allied airborne units were landing, places like Cannes and Saint-Sauveur-Loubicon. To make the illusion even more convincing, Special Air Service, SAS, commandos parachuted in alongside the dummies, carrying loudspeakers that broadcast recorded battlefield sounds. Gunfire, shouting, boots crunching over gravel, all specifically designed to fool German radio surveillance teams. And it worked brilliantly. German radio stations picked up a flood of emergency reports about supposed paratrooper landings, sparking widespread confusion and panic within the Nazi command structure. Some key German defense units, such as the 915th Infantry Regiment, were dispatched to entirely incorrect locations, responding to phantom enemies who didn't even exist. The result? Those lifeless scarecrows became accidental heroes, successfully diverting attention and significantly reducing the casualties suffered by the real Allied paratroopers, including the legendary 101st Airborne Division. Had Operation Titanic not been carried out, it's very possible that the stories told in Band of Brothers would never have been written, or might never have happened at all. The legacy of D-Day isn't just about maps, numbers, or dry historical facts. It lives on in the soil, the relics, and even the grains of sand scattered across the beaches of Normandy, where even stuffed dummies helped shape the course of victory. Fact number 3. The untold story of the only female reporter to set foot on Omaha Beach on D-Day. On June 6, 1944, as the beaches of Normandy turned into a living hell under a storm of bullets and fire, the entire world believed that these battlegrounds were strictly for men, soldiers, officers, and those bearing arms. But one woman defied every rule, shattered gender barriers, and stepped right into the heart of the battlefield. That woman was Martha Gellhorn. Born in 1908, Martha Gellhorn wasn't just a journalist. She was a symbol of courage and defiance. She was a trailblazer, one of the world's first female war correspondents at a time when such roles were considered exclusive to men. Before the outbreak of World War II, Gellhorn had already carved out a fearless path in journalism. By the age of 32, she had reported from the front lines of the bloody Spanish Civil War, spent 2 months living in the White House, and married legendary writer Ernest Hemingway, a man who once thought he was the center of every adventure until he met a woman even more drawn to danger than himself. When World War II erupted, Gellhorn didn't stay on the sidelines. She showed up in the world's most volatile war zones, from the icy landscapes of Finland, the rugged mountains of Czechoslovakia, to the brutal battlegrounds of China and the Italian campaign in 1943. But when the most pivotal moment of the war, the D-Day invasion, approached, Gellhorn once again found herself pushed out. Here's Magazine, where she was a correspondent, was granted permission to send only one journalist to cover the landings in France. And the one who claimed that spot, none other than her husband, Hemingway, who used his fame to secure the assignment. Refusing to be sidelined during what she believed was the greatest story of the century, Martha Gellhorn chose an unthinkable route. She posed as a nurse to sneak aboard a hospital ship and hid in a bathroom throughout the voyage until it reached the waters off Normandy. Under the cover of darkness and amidst the chaos, she disembarked on a small landing craft alongside real medics. Following white tape markers laid across the blood-soaked sands, she made her way through the smoke, explosions, and fallen soldiers on Omaha Beach, heading toward a Red Cross field tent. There, Gellhorn began interviewing battle-weary soldiers on the front lines, capturing their raw emotions and stories amid the thunder of artillery and the whistle of flying bullets. But she didn't just report. She rolled up her sleeves and helped evacuate the wounded, guiding the most seriously injured men back to the hospital ship and away from the nightmare unfolding on the shore. When she returned to England, Gellhorn was immediately arrested for entering a restricted combat zone without authorization. But she was only briefly detained, a small bump in a journey full of bold, rule-breaking choices. She would go on to follow the Allied forces to the Ardennes front, where she reported on the Battle of the Bulge, and later witnessed the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp, delivering some of the most powerful and emotionally charged accounts of war's aftermath to the world. To this day, Martha Gellhorn remains the only woman officially recorded as having landed on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. And she did it without credentials, without support, and without asking for anyone's permission. She did it for one reason only: the call of journalism, and the unshakable resolve of a woman who refused to be left out of history. Fact number 4, the tiny submarines and the top-secret mission that cleared the way for the greatest invasion in history. While thousands of soldiers were gearing up for the bloody assault on the beaches of Normandy, a much smaller group of men was operating in total silence, deep beneath the waves, and almost no one knew they existed. They weren't carrying rifles or driving tanks. Instead, they were piloting miniature submarines called X-Craft, a top-secret British invention created specifically for critical missions in the lead-up to D-Day. X-Craft submarines were extremely compact, just about 15 meters long and barely wide enough for a man to maneuver inside. Each one was operated by a crew of just 4 men, and surprisingly, their engines didn't come from advanced military tech. They were repurposed London bus engines, a testament to the sheer ingenuity born out of wartime necessity. Originally, X-Craft were designed to sabotage enemy warships by attaching explosives to their hulls, essentially functioning as underwater suicide bombers. But as the Normandy invasion was planned, their role shifted dramatically. They were reassigned to perform covert underwater reconnaissance, laying the groundwork for the largest amphibious invasion in modern military history. That's when a special Allied unit was formed, COP, short for Combined Operations Pilotage and Reconnaissance Parties. This elite team was tasked with a high-risk mission to approach the northern coast of France from beneath the surface, mapping the terrain, surveying sandbars, identifying obstacles, and pinpointing mine placements set by the Nazis. Starting in January 1944, X-Craft subs and their reconnaissance teams began quietly patrolling the northern French coastline. Using sonar and periscopes, they were able to identify 5 critical landing sites: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, which would later become the primary landing zones for the Allied invasion. They also played a crucial role in locating and helping to disable underwater mines laid by the Germans, ensuring the invasion fleet could advance safely when the time came. But their most dangerous and vital mission came just before the operation began. On the night of June 2nd into the early hours of June 3rd, 2 X-Craft submarines, X-20 and X-23, secretly positioned themselves about 5 kilometers off the coast of Normandy. Under the cover of darkness, and with strict orders to remain undetected, their crews used special signal lights, depth-sounding equipment, and radio beacons to mark the exact landing zones for the incoming Allied forces. These submariners were, technically, the first Allied personnel to reach French territory, not by foot, but by steel, stealth, and raw courage. But then something unexpected happened. The weather turned. Storms and high waves forced the invasion to be delayed. It was a make-or-break moment because the X-Craft subs only carried enough oxygen for 64 hours of underwater operation. Had the delay lasted just 1 day longer, the crews would have been forced to surface, blowing the cover on the entire D-Day operation. In a state of extreme tension, the submariners turned to benzodrine, a legal stimulant at the time, to stay awake for hours on end. They had to remain motionless, silent, and fully alert, forbidden from signaling, sleeping, or even moving too much inside their tiny steel tubes. Thankfully, on June 5th, the weather calmed just in time. Thanks to the precise navigation points established by X-20 and X-23, the massive Allied fleet, comprised of thousands of warships and landing craft, was able to hit the exact positions needed to launch the invasion. Today, only 1 X-Craft submarine survives, quietly displayed at the Royal Navy Submarine Museum in Gosport, England. But the role these small vessels and the silent, fearless men who operated them played in D-Day deserves far more recognition. They were the unsung heroes who lit the path for history's most daring amphibious assault. Fact number 5, the silent lifeline beneath the waves, the secret fuel pipeline that powered the Allied advance. Capturing territory is one thing, but keeping the momentum going, ensuring thousands of tanks, aircraft, and transport vehicles stayed fueled and ready for battle was an even greater challenge. That's one of the many reasons why the D-Day invasion couldn't have succeeded without a logistical marvel few people know about: Operation Pluto. The name Pluto isn't just a reference to the distant planet, it actually stood for pipeline under the ocean, a secret fuel pipeline system laid beneath the English Channel. In 1942, at the height of World War II, British engineers proposed a plan so bold it sounded like science fiction. Construct an undersea pipeline stretching from England to France to ensure a steady flow of fuel to Allied forces once they landed on European soil. Instead of relying on slow and vulnerable fuel tankers, prime targets for German U-boats, they developed 2 revolutionary types of pipelines. HAS, made of a lead core encased in steel, designed to handle high pressure. These pipes were deployed using modified deep-sea cable-laying ships. Hamel, constructed from thick steel and wound onto enormous floating spools called conundrums that resembled giant 60-foot-tall sewing bobbins. These monstrous coils were pulled across the ocean by tugboats, looking like steel dragons trailing behind ships. The pipeline network stretched from the Isle of Wight on the southern coast of England all the way under the Channel to Cherbourg, France, the point where the Allies would need fuel the most as they advanced inland. But building the system was just one part of the mission. Keeping it secret was crucial. To fool German intelligence, the Allies launched a massive deception campaign. Fuel pumping stations were disguised as seaside cottages, old forts, even amusement parks. A completely fake harbor was also built at Dover, designed to draw the attention of German reconnaissance aircraft from the Luftwaffe. They even used giant wind machines to kick up dust, simulating active construction sites. And in an incredible touch of realism, King George VI himself visited the fake site, lending it a royal seal of authenticity. The ruse worked brilliantly. Just 2 months after D-Day, the first Pluto line went operational. Silent rivers of fuel began flowing beneath the sea, powering the Allied war machine. Eventually, 17 pipelines were laid and began delivering over 3,500 tons of fuel per day to the front lines, an astonishing feat that kept tanks rolling, trucks moving, planes flying, and momentum building. Operation Pluto didn't involve bullets or bombs, but without it, the Allied advance could have stalled mid-campaign, running out of gas, quite literally potentially altering the course of the entire war. D-Day, not just a battle, but a triumph of intelligence and courage. Now that you know about a battleship that intentionally flooded itself just to keep fighting from the sea. A fearless female war correspondent who defied orders to document history from the front lines. Dummy paratroopers that fooled the mighty Nazi war machine into defending the wrong locations. Tiny submarines called X-Craft, which scouted the beaches and marked the path for an entire army. And a hidden pipeline network beneath the ocean that quietly powered a global offensive. You'll realize that the Normandy landings weren't just about firepower. They were about ingenuity, deception, daring, and silent sacrifice. June 6, 1944 is more than just a date in history. It's a symbol of what happens when human brilliance and bravery come together to change the world.